सो हेलो गाइस, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल। कैसे हैं आप लोग? मुझे उम्मीद है बहुत अच्छे होंगे। आज हम पढ़ेंगे क्लास 11 इकोनॉमिक्स चैप्टर 3 डिमांड। इसके हम पूरे कंप्लीट सॉल्यूशन देखेंगे फ्रॉम एमसीक्यू टू डिटेल क्वेश्चन आंसर्स। बिना टाइम वेस्ट किए लेट्स बिगिन। Choose the correct options. Factors affecting demand can be classified into how many categories? 2. How is the demand curve sloped? Negative. What is the other name for poor quality commodities? Very cheap commodities. How many types of price elasticity of demand are there? 5. What is the relationship between price and demand? Negative. What kind of commodities are called compulsory commodities? Joint. What is the movement of demand curve when demand expands downward? Which one has no relation with demand curve? Supply. Who has present law of demand? Alfred Marshall. When products are expensive, then how is the demand of prestigious goods of the rich? More. Answer the following questions in one sentence. What is demand? The quantity of a commodity which a buyer desires is able and willing to buy at a given price at a given point of the time is called demand. What is income elasticity of demand? The extent, degree of change in demand for a good because of a change in income of the consumer is called income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity equals to EY equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in income. Question 3. What is cross elasticity of demand? When the demand of the concerned commodity changes in response to the change in price of its related good, either substitute or compulsory good, then the extent of such change in demand is called cross elasticity or cross price elasticity of demand. The cross price elasticity may be a positive or negative value depending on whether the goods are compulsory or substitutes. When is there possibility of expansion contraction of demand? Assuming other factors constant, when the price falls or rises, there is a possibility of expansion contraction of demand. In which situation does demand decreases or increases? Assuming price is constant, when consumers increase or decrease their demand due to some other factors, it is known as increase or decrease in demand. Why is the law of demand called conditional law? The law of demand holds true only on the condition that the factors influencing demand other than the price remains constant. Hence, it is called as conditional law. Answer the following questions in short. What is demand function? Demand function, the cause and effect relationship between demand and its various factors can be expressed as a mathematical function. The demand function is a mathematical function between demand for a good and the determinants that affect its demand. The demand function shows that demand for a good is dependent on how many factors such as price of the good, taste and preferences of a consumer, income of a consumer, price of related goods, size of the population, etc. The mathematical form of the demand function dx equals to f px py pe t yu, where dx equals to demand for commodity x, f equals to functional notation, px equals to price of commodity x, py equals to price of a related commodity y, p equals to expectation regarding future price, t equals to taste and preferences of the consumer, y equals to consumer's income, u equals to other factors. ये फॉर्मूला आपको एग्ज़ाम में एमसीक्यू में पूछ सकते हैं, सो इम्पॉर्टेंट है ये. Question 2. What is substitution effect? Substitution effect. When price of the concerned good falls, it becomes relatively cheaper than its substitutes. Hence, a consumer which reduce the consumption of substitute goods and increase the demand of the concerned goods. This is called substitution effect. What is mean by given goods? Given goods, inferior goods. When price of certain goods, namely inferior goods, fall and the real income of a consumer rises, he may reduce the consumption of such goods and substitute them with goods of superior quality. It was Robert Giffen who made this observation and explained this concept. Hence, these goods, that is, inferior goods, are also called Giffen goods. Such goods are necessary goods and are purchased by the low income groups. गिफन गुड्स के जो क्वेश्चंस हैं वो भी इम्पोर्टेंट है एंड वो एग्ज़ाम में आ सकते हैं. What is individual demand? Individual demand. The demand of a good by an individual consumer at a given price at a particular point of time is called individual demand. What is market demand? Market demand. The sum of total of all individual demands of all existing consumers in the market at a given price at a particular point of time is called market demand. Question 6. What is price elasticity of demand? Price elasticity of demand. The law of demand explains that when other factors of demand are assumed to be constant, as price falls, demand expands, and as price rises, demand contracts. However, this law does not state by what proportion demand expands or contracts. The concept of price elasticity of demand explains this, meaning a measure that shows the proportion extent to which demand changes with respect to change in price is called price elasticity of demand. It is denoted by EP. Definition. According to Marshall, the degree of elasticity of demand depends upon the extent of rise in demand because of a fall in price and upon the extent of fall in demand because of a rise in price. Question 7. Which commodities are called precious commodities? Certain goods which are priced very high and are generally consumed by very rich people, like expensive jewelry, expensive cars, expensive mobile phones, etc., are expectations to the law of demand. Question 8. State the names of methods to measure price elasticity of demand. The 5 types of price elasticity of demand are: first, perfectly elastic demand. EP equals to infinity. Perfectly inelastic demand. EP equals to 0. Unitary unit elastic demand. EP equals to 1. Relatively elastic demand. EP greater than 1. Relatively inelastic demand. EP less than 1. Answer the following questions in brief points. Define income effect and substitution effect. Income effect: when the monetary income of a consumer remains constant but price of the goods fall, then his real income rises. Real income means the purchasing power of money income. When real income rises, a consumer can buy more quality of a good and therefore its demand may rise. This is known as income effect of demand. Substitution effect: when price of the concerned goods fall, it becomes relatively cheaper than its substitutes. Hence, a consumer will reduce the consumption of substitute goods and increase the demand for the concerned goods. This is called substitution effect. Explain expansion and contraction of demand along with diagram. Expansion and contraction of demand. Expansion contraction demand takes place when price varies and other determinants of demand are held constant. Keeping other determinants constant, if price falls, demand expands, and if price rises, demand contracts. Let us take an example to understand the expansion and contraction of demand. The scheduled table given below contains data of price of a commodity. Price of a commodity in rupees, demand of the commodity in units. Note: price of the commodity in rupees. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Demand of the commodity in units: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Note: demand contracts due to rise in price, demand expands due to fall in price. And here is a chart, expansion and contraction of demand. सो ये जो डायग्राम एंड टेबल है ये भी आपको इस क्वेश्चन में ड्रॉ करना होगा. ये कंटिन्यू है वो क्वेश्चन का. सपोज इनिशियली द प्राइस ऑफ द कमोडिटी इज ₹3. At this price, its demand is 3 units. This is plotted at point A in the diagram. Explanation: When price falls to rupees 1, demand expands to 5 rupees, which is shown as point C in the diagram. The downward movement from the point A to the point C on the demand curve DD is called expansion of demand. Note, the movement of the curve is downward because of the price indicated on the y-axis has fallen. Contraction. In the second scenario, if the initial price of rupees 3 rises to rupees 5, the demand contracts from 3 units to 1 unit, which is shown as point B in the diagram. The upward movement from point A to point B on the same demand curve DD is called contraction of demand. Note, the movement of the curve is upward because the price indicated on y-axis has risen. Expansion and contraction of demand occur on the same demand curve. Expansion is a downward movement to the demand curve and the contraction is upward movement to the demand curve. इससे हमने क्या सीखा कि अगर कोई प्रोडक्ट है एंड उसकी प्राइस ₹3 है एंड अगर उसकी प्राइस ₹3 से ₹1 पे आती है, सो उसका जो डिमांड है वो इंक्रीज हो जाएगा। एंड अगर वही प्रोडक्ट की प्राइस ₹3 से ₹5 हो जाती है, तो उसकी डिमांड जो है वो घट जाएगी। बस, इसके अलावा इसमें कुछ नहीं है। क्वेश्चन 3, एक्सप्लेन इंक्रीज एंड डिक्रीज ऑफ डिमांड एंड रिप्रेजेंट इट diagrammatically. Increase decrease in demand takes place when price is assumed constant and determinants other than price varies. Keeping prices constant, if factors determinants other than price vary or there occurs increase decrease in demand, we take price, which is an independent variable on y-axis, and demand on x-axis. So when price remains fixed, that is constant, the demand on horizontal axis changes. This causes rightward leftward shift in the demand curve DD. Rightward shift, keeping price factor as constant. If demand increases due to any other factor, the demand curve will shift towards right, which is called rightward shift in demand curve. Leftward shift, keeping price factor as constant. If demand decreases due to any other factor, the demand curve will shift towards left, which is called leftward shift in demand. Let us take an example to understand the increase and decrease in the demand. The schedule table given below contains data of price of a commodity and its demand at various prices. Note that the price is ₹3 is constant. A demand curve is plotted for the given data. Increase and decrease in demand. The initial demand is represented by a demand curve D1. Here at price of ₹3 is 3 units. This is plotted at point A on D1. Increase in demand when price remains constant at ₹3, but due to one or other factors demand increases at to 5 units, then the demand curve shifts to the right to D3. This is indicated by rightward movement of the demand curve from point A to point C. Decrease in demand. At constant price, if the initial demand of 3 units decreases to 1 unit, the demand curve shifted leftward from point A, that is D1, to point B, that is D2. Thus, more than one demand curves are generated to depict increase or decrease in demand. A rightward shift of the demand curve shows increase in demand and a leftward shift shows decrease in demand. Question 4. What is income elasticity of demand? Meaning, income elasticity of demand is useful to measure changes in the demand for a commodity with respect to change in the income of a consumer. The extent degree of a change in demand for a good because of a change in income of a consumer is called income elasticity of demand. It is denoted by EY. Income elasticity equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in income. Types, degrees of income elasticity of demand. Positive income elastic demand. There are 3 degrees of positive income elasticity of demand. They are unit income elastic demand, EY equals to 1, elasticity of demand greater than 1 unity, EY greater than 1, elasticity of demand less than unity, EY less than 1. Negative income elasticity demand, zero income elastic demand. Explain the expectations to the law of demand. As per the law of demand, when the price rises, the demand falls, and vice versa. However, for some goods, there are expectations to this law. Under these expectations, when price of a good falls, its demands also falls instead of rising, and vice versa. Thus, change in price creates demand to change in opposite direction, then that's indicate in the law of demand. Examples of such goods are prestigious goods, certain goods which are priced very high and are generally consumed by very rich people, like expensive jewelry, expensive cars, expensive mobile phones, etc. considered prestigious goods. Such goods are used by the rich as status symbol. Even if their price rises, their demand expands instead of contrasting. On the other hand, if their price falls, the rich may contract their demand and avoid buying such goods with the mindset that a fall in price means that the good is losing its prestigious and will now be in reach of even common people. Example of such products are Mercedes car, iPhone, etc. Extremely low price goods. Certain goods are extremely low price. The consumer spends a very small proportion of his income on these products. For example, pins, stapler pins, toffee, etc. Even if price of such goods rise, consumers' demand for these goods may not fall. Similarly, if their price falls, the consumer may not expand his demand as he may not need more of such goods than is actual need. Given goods, inferior goods. When price of certain goods, namely inferior goods, fall and the real income of a consumer rises, he may reduce the consumption of such goods and substitute them with goods of superior quality. It was Robert Giffen who made this observation and explained this concept. Hence, these goods, that is, inferior goods, are also called Giffen goods. Such goods are necessary goods and are purchased by the low income groups. Special preferences of people. At times, people get very accumulist and used to certain goods they cannot do with any other goods. Even if there is some rise in the price of the preferred goods, their demand may not decrease. Answer the following questions in detail. Explain individual demand and market demand along with diagram. In economics, we can classify demand into two parts. They are individual demand, the demand of a good by an individual consumer at a given price at a particular point of time is called individual demand. Second, market demand, the sum total of all individual demands of all existing consumer in the market at a given price at a particular point of time is called market demand. The table given below shows individual demand of consumer A, B and C. The last column of the data table is an submission of individual demand. This submitted demand is called the market demand. The first three diagrams shows individual demand of each customer, whereas the fourth diagram shows their combined demand, that is market demand. सो ये टेबल है, इसे आपको ड्रॉ करना है और आगे जो भी चार्ट्स है वो भी आपको ड्रॉ करने हैं. Price of the commodity in rupees 10,8642. Demand by individual A in units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Demand by individual B in units 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Demand by individual C in units 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Market demand, total of demand by A, B, C and units 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. So ये है चार्ट पर्सन A का. Price of the commodity, demand for the commodity in units. Coming to the next, demand curve of person B, demand curve for person C, and the final market demand curve. And the conclusion, since demand curve of individual demands of all customers, that is A, B and C, have downward sloping curves, the market demand curve also slopes downward. Define demand and explain factors affecting demand. Demand, the quantity of a commodity which a buyer desires, is able and willing to buy at a given price at a given point of time is called demand. Demand is defined for determined by five factors, namely desire, willingness to buy, ability to buy, a particular price, and a particular point of time. All these five factors are necessary for defining demand. The factors that determine demand, that is, determinants of demand of a commodity services, can be classified into two main parts. They are price of commodity service, factors other than price, that is, other determinants. Price of commodity service, price of a good is the most important determinant of its demand. When a price of a good falls, a thoughtful consumer buy more and the demand expands. When price falls, thoughtful consumer buys less and so demand contracts. Second, other determinants. First, taste and preferences of a consumer. Demand depends a lot on taste and preferences of consumer. Taste and preferences are associated with the likes and dislikes of a consumer as well as several other factors such as age, trends, etc. Example, if a person is fond of reading, his preference for reading will change with age. At a young age, a person prefers to read storybooks. At a adolescent, he may prefer to read novels, and in the old age may prefer to read spiritual books. Income of a consumer. The demand for a commodity increase with increase in the consumer income. Similarly, when his income falls, his demand for a good falls. Thus, there is a direct relationship between income and demand. Inferior goods. Contrasted to this fact, there are some goods called inferior goods on which this direct relationship does not hold true. In economics, an inferior goods is a good whose demand decreases when consumer income rises or whose demand rises when consumers income decreases. Example of inferior goods services. For example, traveling through intercity bus is a cheaper, inferior mode than air or rail travel, but is more time consuming. When a consumer has less money, he prefers traveling by bus, that is, demand for bus travel is more. However, when his income rises, he prefers faster and more comfortable transport systems such as private car or by air, that is, demand for bus travel decreases. Price of related goods. Goods such as french fries and ketchup that are closely related to each other are called related goods. The price of related goods is one of the other factors affecting demand. Related goods are classified as either substitute goods or compulsory goods. The demand for a particular goods depends upon the price and availability of its related goods, namely substitute goods and complementary goods. For example, if the price of french fries gets doubled, the demand for ketchup may decline. Fourth, expectations about future prices. An individual expectations about the future prices of a good affects his current demand for that good. If the consumer expects the price of a good to rise in the future, his demand for that goods increases in the current time and vice versa. Size and demographic profile of population. The size of population as well as the demographic profile of the people impacts the total market's demand for a region. If the population of a region is large, then total market demand will be more and vice versa. Similarly, if majority of people belongs to a particular age group, then the demand for certain goods in the market will be more. For example, a cafe will be in more demand near colleges because of higher concentration of youths. Question 3. Explain law of demand with the help of schedule and diagram. Demand schedule. A demand schedule is a table that shows the willingness of a consumer to buy different qualities of a good at various prices. The graphical representation of a demand schedule is called a demand curve. Example. The data shown in the table below is an imaginary example of demand schedule. Price of milk in rupees 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Demand of milk in liters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Demand of milk in liters, price of milk in rupees. The schedule table shows various prices of milk and its demand at those prices. The data of schedule is plotted on graph how to obtain a demand curve. Price of milk, which is an independent variable, is taken y-axis, and the demand for milk, which is dependent on price, is taken on x-axis. demand curve. By plotting the demand given in the schedule at various prices, we get points A, B, C, D, and E. These plotted points shows the various price demand combinations. On joining these points, we get the demand curve DD. These curves slope downward from left to right, which indicate that there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. Explanation of the demand curve. At point A, price of milk is rupees 50 and the demand is 1 liter. At point B, when the price falls to rupees 40, the demand rises to 2 liters. Similarly, at point E, when price falls as low as 10, the demand expands as high as 5 liter. इसमें भी कुछ नहीं है. जब मिल्क का प्राइस ज़्यादा था तब डिमांड कम थी, एंड जब मिल्क का प्राइस कम था तब डिमांड ज़्यादा थी. बस और कुछ नहीं है. Analysis and conclusion. Price and demand and inversely proportionate, that is when price rises demand falls and vice versa. सेम चीज़ जो मैंने कही वही है. when price rises demand falls and vice versa, मतलब जब प्राइस कम होगी तो डिमांड ज़्यादा होगी. These inverse relationships occurs because of two reasons. They are income effect and substitution effect. Question 4. Define price elasticity of demand and explain its types with diagrams. Price elasticity of demand, a measure that shows the proportion or extent to which demand changes with the respect to change in price, is called price elasticity of demand. It is denoted by EP. According to Marshall, the degree of elasticity of demand depends upon the extent of rise in demand because of a fall in price and upon the extent of a fall in demand because of rise in price. Price elasticity of demand equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in price. Perfectly inelastic demand, EP equals to 0. Perfectly inelastic demand is opposite of perfectly elastic demand. When price of a commodity, say commodity K, changes by any amount, say 10%, but there is absolutely no change in its demand, then such a demand is called perfectly inelastic demand. EP equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in price equals to 0% divided by plus 10% equals to 0. In perfectly elastic demand, price elasticity, that is EP, equals to 0. As shown in the diagram, the DD1 demand curve is a vertical straight line parallel to y-axis. The curve shows that whatever be the change in price, the demand remains constant. Such elasticity of demand is always 0. This is the diagram of perfectly inelastic demand. You have to draw this as well. Unitary elastic demand, EP equals to 1. When the percentage proportionate change in demand is equally proportionate to percentage proportionate change in price, then it is called unitary elastic demand. For example, if price of commodity S falls by 5% and its demand also be changes by 5%, then it is called unitary change in demand. EP equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in price equals to plus 5% divided by minus 5% equals to 1. In unitary elastic demand, price elasticity, that is equals to 1. As shown in the diagram on the demand curve DD, when the price falls by PP1, demand expands by MM1. Note that PP1 equals to MM1. Diagram of unitary elastic demand. Relatively elastic demand, EP greater than 1. When price elasticity, that is EP greater than 1, it is called relatively elastic demand. When a percentage change in demand is proportionately more than percentage change in price, then such demand is called relatively elastic demand. This type of elasticity is observed for luxury goods like televisions, cars, etc. For example, if price of commodity R rises by 10% and its demand falls by 30%, then its demand is called relatively elastic demand. EP equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in price equals to minus 30% plus divided by plus 10% equals to 3. Demand for the commodity As can be seen for the calculation, a small rise changes of 10% in the price made a large change of 30% in the demand of the commodity. In the diagram on the demand for the commodity demand curve DD1, which price rises by PP1 amount, demand falls by MM1 amount, which is proportionately greater than that of price. Relatively inelastic demand EP less than 1. When price when percentage change in demand is proportionately lesser than percentage change in price, then such demand is called relatively inelastic demand. For example, when price of commodity G rises by 20% and as a result its demand falls only by 5%, then its demand is called relatively inelastic demand. When price elasticity is less than 1, 0, then the demand is called inelastic demand and is 0 less than 1. This type of inelastic is found goods of daily needs such as food grains, milk, oil, etc. EP equals to proportionate change in demand divided by proportionate change in price. Minus 5% divided by plus 20% equals to 1 divided by 4 equals to 0.25. Relatively inelastic demand. In the diagram of demand curve DD1, when the price rises by PP1 amount, demand falls by MM1 amount, which is proportionately lesser than that of price.